Hello and welcome back to another video where today I will be reviewing the recent DLC for Watchdogs Legions called Bloodlines. Before we start, I would like to say that unlike my Metopia review, this is unscripted, so sorry if some of this is a little bit confusing, as I have notes in front of me, but it's not going to be in a specific order, so just be warned, I may be jumping about from point to point. I will also be only using gameplay from the first 2 and a bit hours into the DLC because I don't want for you to view like final boss spoilers, but trust me, I will be getting to the final boss. So I have a few thoughts about what I think of the final boss, as I didn't particularly like it. So I'm just going to come out and say it. I prefer the story in Bloodlines a lot more than I did the story in the actual main game of Legion. For those of you who don't know, the main story in Bloodlines is Aiden Pierce has been tasked to steal something called a broker bridge in London, and the only reason he accepts the job is because his nephew Jackson from the first game is actually living in London, and before he gets to actually steal the broker bridge, a wrench from Watchdogs 2 actually steals it and then runs away, and they have like a fight, and then as a result of the fight Aiden gets kidnapped, and the main villain of the game is Thomas Rempart, and he pretty much says to Aiden, you need to get this back, otherwise I'll kill your nephew. So that's kind of the main reason why Aiden is actually bothering to get the broker bridge, because if not, Aiden probably just wouldn't care and would just leave London. But as he specifically threatened Jackson's life, Aiden decides to stay just to keep his nephew safe. And throughout the course of the DLC, Jackson's and Aiden's relationship does change. At the beginning, Jackson isn't too pleased to see Aiden again, as in the context of the universe, he hasn't seen Aiden in 15 years. And if your uncle just broke into your house, you hadn't seen in 15 years, I think you would react the same way, and especially considering that it's sort of Aiden's fault that Jackson's sister died, but that's a whole story for like a different time. But that's pretty much the reason why Aiden is in London. And Wrench does also factor into the plot as well. He's not just there in the beginning and disappears, but I'll get to Wrench a little bit later, because first I want to focus more on Aiden. So Aiden is primarily the main character you play as in Bloodlines DLC. Something happens about halfway through that means you have to switch to playing to Wrench, and like I said earlier, I will get to talking to Wrench a bit later. But Aiden is kind of like his Watchdogs 1 self, but obviously a bit slow and a bit more sluggish. But aside from that, he is still a good character to play as, and he still has his blackout ability from Watchdogs 1, but this time they've kind of not made it as big as they did in the first game. Like, it pretty much short circuits everything around him, like it jams guns, it does stuff to the robots that are in the game, it pretty much just shuts down everything around him and also stuns people. It's a really cool ability that he has. And another ability that he has is a spider bot, but it's not like a normal spider bot that you get in the main game. This spider bot has the ability to fly as well, so if a press of the button you can go between crawling around on the floor and flying up in the air. And I will say, this drone saved my life quite a lot, as there were some objectives where you needed to, say, hack something on a roof, but it would take so long to climb up. Like, you'd have to maybe go through the building, kill everyone, and then manually with Aiden interact with the terminal. With the spider bot, you can just switch to flying mode, fly up, interact with the station, and then fly back down, and that's it. So that drone is pretty cool to play as. And those are Aiden's main abilities in the game. He also has his signature pistol from Watch Dogs 1, and with every gun he has this ability where when you reload the gun, a bar appears on the screen, and if you time it right, he will gain a special damage boost but I think for about 30 seconds, I believe, he does increased damage. So say if a headshot took 2 shots, with this gun it only takes 1. It doesn't have to be just his pistol, it can be any gun. Like, obviously I kept his main pistol for the game because I couldn't be bothered to change guns, and I'll get to the gun customization system a bit later, because when you start the DLC you only have access to 2 guns, and when you do side missions, that is how you unlock different guns for Aiden. So that is primarily all the stuff that Aiden can do. Now let's talk about Wrench. Now you don't get to play as Wrench until about 2/3 of the way through, because something happens in the story that kind of does something to Aiden, which means you can't play as him. But playing as Wrench is very different to playing as Aiden. In the context of the game, Wrench is younger, so that means gameplay wise Wrench is a bit quicker to play as, he's a bit more snappy, and as a character Wrench I think is a lot more funnier than Aiden. As we saw in Watch Dogs 2, Wrench has got great comedic timing, and in this game he is still hilarious. But some of the stuff that he's meant to say is a bit childish, considering he's a 40-year-old man in the context of the game talking like a teenager. That is a little bit off-putting. Like with his side missions, when he's talking to his contractor, it does seem a little bit childish. So I wish they kind of like pulled back on kind of like all the silly dumb jokes that he pulls. But aside from that, he is a great character to play as, and he has a ability which is a cargo drone, which made me thinking that's not that different to the main game. But his cargo drone is like the fastest cargo drone in the game. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if it's as fast as some cars. Like, it's quick. Like, I saw a video on YouTube of a person playing online, and they was doing like a race. One person playing as Wrench, one person was playing as like a normal operative, and my lord, does his cargo drone go quick. Another thing that Wrench has is a hammer, and when you smack the hammer down on the floor, it kind of sends out this EMP blast, I guess, and it kind of like dazes enemies around you, allowing you to do a takedown on them. And he also has a very good gun. It's a kind of like assault rifle, but if you shoot it at, say, a robot, it will short circuit them for a bit, and there's a cooldown that's like a few seconds, and then you can fire it again. It's really good. And if you shoot it at like human enemies, it will disrupt them, allowing you to either run away or take them down. My main gripe when playing as Wrench is that you only get to play him for the last third. I feel like there's a bit in the DLC about 2 hours in where Jackson says to Aiden, I need to go and research something, and you're pretty much forced to do side missions while Jackson gets back to you. And I feel like this bit is padding. Like, I feel like if they'd cut this bit out and kind of had the bit what happens to Aiden in the story and makes you play as Wrench earlier, it would feel a bit more balanced, because I feel like for most of the DLC you are playing as Aiden and you only play as Wrench for like a fraction, and you also do the final boss as Wrench. So maybe if you'd actually played as Wrench for a bit longer, it might actually prompt you to maybe want to choose Aiden for the final boss. Maybe that's just me rambling. But once you finish the DLC, don't think that that's all it has to offer. Like I mentioned earlier, there are also side quests to do, and doing these side quests as Aiden is how you unlock more weapons, and the same thing with Wrench as well. But the difference between doing side missions as Aiden and Wrench is that Aiden has more side missions to offer him. Like in the menu there's a couple of sections like upgrades you get through the main game, 3 sets of upgrades for Aiden and 1 set for Wrench. Like I was saying about earlier, like maybe if they made you play as Wrench for a bit longer, then maybe they'd give you 2 sets of upgrades for each character. But it seems like Aiden is the main character they want you to play as, and at the end they're just like panicking because they needed a way to make Wrench actually seem like he had a point in the story, so they just did something to Aiden to go, there you go, play as Wrench, so that I felt like didn't really flesh him out as much. But yeah, I just felt like they could have planned a tiny bit more with Wrench's integration and playable in the story. If you own the Season Pass for Watchdogs Legions, you get to play as Aiden and Wrench in not just the main game of Legion, but also the online mode, and they are really cool to play as in the main story because you actually have a character to play as rather than like essentially a faceless person, as you can just flip-flop between the different characters in the main game. So I think if I do end up replaying Legion, I'll probably stick to either Aiden or Wrench, because actually having a character that we know will actually make the main game a bit more interesting, because it took me a while to actually finish the story of Legion. I didn't feel like I was connecting to like a main character because there really wasn't one, so hopefully this time if I do replay it will be a little bit more engaging. So overall, do I recommend the Watchdogs Legion Bloodlines DLC? And the answer is I highly recommend it. Even if you didn't enjoy the main story of Legion, I would recommend you play the DLC because it has a much more engaging story. As even if you haven't played any of the previous games, the main characters are more engaging and they have more of a character and personality. You have a couple of options of playing the DLC. You can buy it on its own, which I believe is like £15, or you can get it through the Season Pass, which is what I did, and that also gets you the option to play as Wrench and Aiden in the main story. And as Watchdogs Legion and a Season Pass is like constantly going on sale, I'd say just take the plunge, buy the Season Pass so you can play as Aiden and Wrench in the main game, and you also get access to some of the new characters, like there's a assassin from Assassin's Creed coming up at some point. But yeah, those are my thoughts on the Watchdogs Legion Bloodlines DLC. If you liked it, please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe, and I will see you in another video.